The mouse of the day is Ice Cold Ivan, and he made me crank the AC all the way down in here so it's freezing cold. He said he wouldn't do the mouse of the day video unless I made it super cold in here. But anyways, let's get started with his mouse of the day video. This is how the story goes. Ice Cold Ivan stood at the edge of a frozen pond, the moon casting a pale glow over the smooth surface of the ice. The cold air bit at his whiskers, but he didn't flinch. He never did. The other mice in the village knew him as unshakable, unmoved by the ups and downs that rattled everyone else. Ivan was always calm, always controlled. That's how he earned his nickname, Ice Cold Ivan. What no one knew, however, was that Ivan's cold demeanor came with a secret. It wasn't something he could just talk about, and it wasn't something anyone would guess. When the rest of the village was tucked away in their warm burrows, Ivan would slip out into the cold night and make his way to the pond. He wasn't just cold-hearted as they sometimes whispered. No, Ivan had a passion for something most mice had never even thought of. Ice skating. It had started when Ivan was young. The pond had always been there on the outskirts of the village, but no one ever paid it much attention. In summer, it was a quiet, still place, and in the winter, it became a sheet of ice, more of an obstacle to avoid than a destination for most mice, but Ivan had always been different. One winter, when he was just a young mouse, he had wandered onto the ice out of curiosity. At first, he had slipped and scrambled, his paws were flailing beneath him, but after a few tries, something clicked. The feeling of gliding across the ice, the way his body moved, the wind, it was like nothing he'd ever experienced before. It was amazing. That was years ago now, and since then, Ivan had spent every winter night that he could on the ice. His movements had become more graceful, more fluid, as if he was born for it. He would often skate in complete darkness, the moon his only companion, and the ice his only canvas. The stillness of the night made it perfect for him. Quiet, uninterrupted, and solitary. At least it used to be. This night, something was different, though. As Ivan glided across the pond, his claws cutting smooth paths in the ice, he heard a sound that didn't belong. It was faint, barely more than the shuffle of paws, but it was enough to put Ivan on alert. His ears twitched and he stopped mid-glide, his gaze sweeping across the edge of the pond to see what was the matter. Someone else was here. Ivan narrowed his eyes, moving toward the shadow that lined the pond. He didn't like being watched, and more importantly than that, he didn't want anyone else knowing about this part of his life. The pond was his place, his sanctuary. Whoever had dared to intrude wasn't going to get a warm welcome. Then he saw the figure. Standing at the far end of the pond near the old tree was another mouse. At first, Ivan couldn't make out who it was, but as the moonlight shifted, he recognized him. It was Mind Control Mo. Mo had never been the since that strange incident at the tavern. He drank a weird cheese drink that had supposedly possessed him, though no one could say for sure. Most mice kept their distance from Mo these days, as he was prone to extremely odd behavior, standing in corners, staring blankly into space, or mumbling things under his breath. Ivan wasn't afraid of him, but he wasn't exactly keen on socializing with Mo either. Ivan's first instinct was to ignore him, pretend that he hadn't seen him, and carry on with his skating, but something stopped him. Mo wasn't moving. He just stood there, staring out at the ice with an intensity that made Ivan uneasy. It was very off-putting. "What are you doing here?" Ivan called, his voice gruff, more out of habit than anything. Mo didn't respond right away. He blinked slowly, as if coming out of a trance, and then his gaze shifted to Ivan. "Ice," Mo said softly. "It's cold." Ivan raised an eyebrow. "Yeah, that's how it works, Mo." Mo didn't seem to register the sarcasm. He just stood there still, his claws hanging at his sides, his fur ruffled and unkempt. For a moment, Ivan considered leaving him alone. It wasn't his problem if Mo wanted to stare at the ice in the middle of the night. A little weird, but then something unexpected happened. Mo took a step onto the ice. Ivan stiffened. The way Mo moved was awkward, hesitant, like he wasn't sure what he was doing. His claw slipped and he nearly fell, but he caught himself at the last second, his eyes wide with surprise. "I wouldn't recommend that," Ivan called out. "It's harder than it looks." Mo looked at him, then looked down at the ice, his face blank. "I don't know why I'm here," he muttered, more to himself than to Ivan. I just ended up here." Ivan sighed, skating towards him. He wasn't in the mood for company, but he also wasn't going to stand by and watch Mo hurt himself. "You shouldn't be out here if you don't know what you're doing, Mo," Ivan said as he glided to a stop a few feet away from Mo. "Ice skating takes practice, a lot of practice." Mo looked down at his claws, frowning as if he was just noticing the ice beneath him. "I don't know how I got here," he repeated, his voice hollow. Ivan frowned. He had always heard about Mo's strange behavior around the village, but seeing it this up close and personal was very unsettling. "You need to go back," Ivan said firmly. "This is no place for wandering around aimlessly. You could really get hurt, Mo." Mo didn't respond right away. He stared down at the ice, his eyes unfocused as if his mind was somewhere far, far away. Ivan watched him, uncertain of what to do. Ivan wasn't good at dealing with other mice, especially ones like Mo, but he also couldn't just leave him here. Before Ivan could say anything else, Mo looked up, his eyes locking onto Ivan's with an intensity that made him flinch. "Do you feel it?" Mo asked, his voice urgent this time. "The cold, it's everywhere. I can't get away from it." Ivan frowned. "You're standing on ice. Of course it's cold, Mo." Mo shook his head, his paws trembling slightly. No, it's not just the ice, it's something else. It's in my head. It's controlling me." Ivan's expression hardened. He wasn't one that believed in strange tales or superstitions, but there was something very unsettling about the way that Mo spoke that made him pause. The mouse looked genuinely scared, and Ivan had never seen Mo like this before. Listen, Mo, Ivan said, his voice softer than before. You need to go back to the village. Get some rest. You're not thinking straight. Mo took a step closer, his claws slipping slightly on the ice. I can't, he whispered. I don't know how to stop it. Ivan's instinct was to pull away, to distance himself from whatever strange thing was happening to Mo, but for some reason he didn't. He usually wasn't the type to help others, especially not in situations like this, but Mo's fear was real, and despite his usual cold demeanor, Ivan couldn't just leave him. Ice helps me clear my head, Ivan said after a long pause. When everything else feels out of control, ice skating is the one thing that makes sense. It's the one time I feel free. Mo stared at him, his expression unreadable. You skate to feel free? Ivan nodded, surprised at how easily the words had come out. He wasn't used to talking about himself, but here he was sharing something very personal with Mo of all mice. Mo's eyes flicked to the ice beneath his feet. He didn't say anything for a long moment, but then, without warning, he took another step forward, his paws slipping slightly as he tried to steady himself. He was clumsy, awkward, but there was a determination in his movements that Ivan hadn't expected. I want to feel free, Mo muttered, his voice barely audible. Ivan watched him struggle, part of him wanting to step in and help, but another part of him knew that Mo needed to figure this out for himself. So instead he did something he rarely did. He offered a hand. Let me show you, Ivan said, holding out a helping claw. Mo hesitated, glancing at Ivan's outstretched claw, then back at the ice. After a long pause, he nodded and took Ivan's claw. Ivan guided him slowly, carefully, showing him how to balance, how to glide instead of walking. Mo was shaky at first, his claws slipping every few seconds, but with Ivan he found his footing. They skated in silence for a while. The only sound was the soft scrape of their claws against the ice. Mo was far from graceful, but he was trying, and that was enough for Ivan. For the first time in a long time, Ivan didn't mind having some company. After what felt like hours, Mo finally slowed to a stop, his chest rising and falling with exhaustion. He looked at Ivan, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. Thank you, Mo said quietly. I didn't think I could do it. Ivan nodded, his own expression still stoic, but there was a hint of warmth in his eyes. You'll get better, he said simply. It just takes time, Mo. Mo smiled again, and for the first time in a long time, he felt like himself. Thanks for all your help, Ivan, Mo said. Do you guys mess with Ice Cold Ivan?